We'll see you next time right here on The Real World. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Real World. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. Today, we're talking all about Chris Nolan movies. We're going to rank and review every single Christopher Nolan film. Should be tons of fun. But first, let's kick things off with movie news. Masters of the Universe live-action adaptation is dead at Netflix. Netflix has canceled this movie, but Mattel is going to shop the movie around to other studios. So we could still see this movie that they've already dumped about $30 million into. So we'll just have to wait and see who picks it up. Director Louis Leterrier, who recently directed Fast X, wants to direct a Fortnite movie. So obviously this is a very popular video game. So we'll have to see if he ends up helming the Fortnite movie, which is at this point just inevitable. A new Lego movie is in development. It is, however, a reboot of the series. Warner Brothers sold the rights to Universal. So now Universal Studios has taken over the film rights to the Lego franchise, and they're going to reboot it with a live-action animated hybrid film. I'm a big fan of the Lego movies, so this one has a lot to live up to. New DC animated movies were announced at Comic-Con this weekend. One of them is based on Watchmen, and the other is titled Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths. Both of these are popular comic books. We're not sure how they're going to adapt these exactly. If Watchmen is going to be a prequel or a sequel. We don't know if Crisis on Infinite Earths is set in the Tomorrowverse, but time will tell. This weekend was the fourth biggest opening weekend of all time, the weekend of July 21st through 23rd. Barbie and Oppenheimer raked in an incredible amount of money. Oppenheimer with 80.5 million and Barbie with 155 million, two big hits. Sound of Freedom passed $100 million at the box office on only a $14 million budget. It is doing incredibly well and is the must-see movie of the year. I've got a review on the channel right now. You should check it out. Batman Mask of the Phantasm is getting a 4K release on September 12th to celebrate the film's 30th anniversary. Very excited to pick that up. It's one of my favorite movies in the comic book genre and my favorite Batman movie of all time. Okay, folks, well, that is it for movie news. Now we are ready to jump into our main topic, which is all about Christopher Nolan, this director who has kind of taken Hollywood by storm over the past few years. Joining me on the discussion is Bert. How you doing, man?
I'm not bad. I'm a little disturbed after watching all these Nolan films, though, you know.
I hear you. Great. Now we're on to our other guest, who is Josh. How you doing?
Good. Not as disturbed, but a little time sensitive.
I hear you. I hear you. Yes, we're going to dive into all things Nolan now. So we wanted to kick things off with this question: who is Christopher Nolan? First of all, for those of you who might not know or be aware of this director, he is a 52-year-old filmmaker who is a child of both England and America. So he has an American mother and an English father. And he spent his childhood going back and forth between these two countries across the Atlantic. He has a brother who is a screenwriter, Jonathan, who writes a lot of his films with him. He also is married to Emma Thomas, who is a producer on most of his films as well. So it's kind of a family affair there with the Nolans. Thus far, he's directed 12 feature films with the release of Oppenheimer this weekend. And he has a production company called Syncope, which you'll notice in front of most of his movies. He's an interesting filmmaker. You know, he deals with a lot of interesting concepts. I think, you know, due to his upbringing being split between, you know, England and America, he explores duality a lot in his movies. That's kind of a major theme. He's also obsessed with time as a concept and as a theme as well. He has a lot of cinematic influences going back to the history of movies. He always cites Ridley Scott as one of his major influences, as well as Stanley Kubrick, Terrence Malick, and Alfred Hitchcock. He also grew up watching the James Bond films, so he's a huge fan of 007 and all those movies. So that's kind of a little bit of his background. He's a very unique storyteller who combines thought-provoking philosophy and intriguing ideas with a lot of psychological characters. and big budget spectacle is what he's kind of become known for over the course of his career. So that's a little bit about Nolan. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about what makes a Nolan movie different. As I mentioned, time is a big key factor in all of his films. A lot of his movies have a grand scale, but also have this sense of intimacy, a very character centric kind of filmmaker. He's into kind of obsessive characters who are very good at what they do, very specific jobs. And he's got very layered stories as well. There's a lot of things going on in each of his movies. So he's very unique visually as well. His camera techniques are unique, and he used a lot of IMAX footage, IMAX film he shoots on. He experiments with the use of sound and with visual effects and practical effects and blending those things. A lot of his movies do have, as we kind of mentioned, a very serious tone, sort of darker subject matter he deals with. He's got a very kind of technical, calculated approach to storytelling as well, which makes him unique. Anything you guys wanted to mention as far as Nolan? And I kind of want to get your first experience with him as well. Mine was Batman Begins, but Bert, do you want to give us your first kind of experience with Nolan, your thoughts on him?
Yeah, my first experience was going back to '99. I was watching Siskel and Ebert, which I often did, and they started talking about this film, about how it was told in reverse order, and so I was pretty intrigued by that. And they thought the film was brilliant. Of course, this is Memento we're talking about, and so I ordinarily probably never would have gone to see such a small film, because I'm sort of the big budget guy. I like the bigger films usually. But it was so intriguing that I actually went to the theater to see it, and I'll give my thoughts about that later. But that was my first experience with Nolan, and I did have some thoughts about him in general. He is my favorite filmmaker.
That's right. We did the Best Directors podcast a while back, and he was on that list.
Yeah, exactly. He always finds a way of bringing out a lot of emotion in his films. He's got, to use the word disturbing again, he's got some pretty disturbing setups and premises in his films, or the characters do pretty disturbing things. But I love that he usually strives for original stories that are very compelling. And sometimes he'll, do a historical film and present it in a way that, I wish I could get 1% of that from history class in high school, right? Because most of it just so I love that he brings to light some of those historical things like Oppenheimer. And one thing that's really unique about him too is that I think, unlike most directors, I don't know that he actually cares about the success of the film first and foremost. He doesn't really care if you are happy with the ending or happy with what the characters do. Like there's some films where the characters just generally aren't likable, but they're also often complex and that kind of thing. So we'll get into that. But so those are some really interesting things about him. I feel like mostly he just wants you to be impacted more than anything, more than saying, oh, that was the best action film of the year or something. He's not really about that.
Right. Great thoughts. Josh, why don't you give us your thoughts on Nolan, and if you can remember your first experience with him or not, I don't know.
I couldn't tell you. It may have been Batman Begins. It may have been. I know my friends showed me both Inception and The Prestige, and I can't remember which one was first. So either of those could have also been it. Yeah. Either way, I'm not sure. I really knew who Nolan was probably until Inception. So I feel like that was maybe the third one I saw, because I don't think I knew who he was when I was watching Batman or The Prestige, except just the movie itself. Yeah, essentially it was just came over for movie night and they showed it to me, and we had this like huge discussion after, as you do with some Nolan films that are very thought provoking and discussion provoking. But yeah, stuff that makes him unique, or like what you guys said, a lot of it, at least for me, is like the emphasis on practical effects and doing things in camera. And it seems like he gets more intent on that as he goes. But like Bert, you made a really good point about a film having impact, and I feel like that's like the main thing that he strives for. And it's similar to what we were talking about before with Tom Cruise wanting to have an impact for the audience. And I guess maybe that's more of like the experience that the audience is having, whereas Nolan is specifically like, how is this film impacting you personally? And he really has an emphasis on that. But yeah, kind of what you said as well, Cam, with like this big, grand set pieces and loftiness of the film itself, as far as what the scope of everything they're trying to encompass. It does pretty much always involve time, and then character centered stories.
Excellent. Great stuff. I did find out, since he is such a serious guy, I was curious what his favorite comedy was. And he actually was interviewed on, I think it was the Rich Eisen show on like SportsCenter ESPN or
Oh,
something. And he claims that Talladega Nights is his favorite comedy of all time,
what?
which is such an off the wall choice, but I
Huh.
love it. He even quoted it. He's like, if you ain't first, you're last. So it's pretty good. Anyways, just had to mention that. Well, here's how we're going to go through this. We're going to go through this not in our typical fashion of going through all of his movies chronologically, since he's all about playing with time. We're going to do the same thing and just go through our rankings. We haven't shared each other's rankings. We don't know how each other's rankings are. So we're just going to kick it off with Josh because he's actually seen Oppenheimer. Bert and I have not gotten a chance to see it yet. So we wanted to start off with Josh. Go ahead and give us your number 12 Nolan film, your least favorite of his filmography.
I think that's kind of the way for most of these, that it's like, okay, which one's your least favorite? Because
Right.
they're all so good. Same thing with the
Yeah.
mission movies, like they're all fantastic. So what you gotta rank them? What's on the bottom?
Right.
And for me, that's his movie Following. That was his debut. I think it's his weakest film. It definitely, I like the black and white. I like the some of the interesting, again, thought-provoking things that he's dealing with, and that his characters bring up in the film. Like just one of the quotes he had was one of the characters, Cobb, says, "That's what it's all about: interrupting someone's life." He's a thief. He just goes into someone's homes and messes things up or steals things. It just depends, but making them see all the things they took for granted. Like when they go back and buy all this stuff that was stolen, they'll have to think for the first time why they wanted all this stuff, what it's for. You take it away and show them what they had. And it's like, okay, obviously we don't agree with thievery and burglary and stealing, but that's an interesting like concept. It makes you think like, oh, what are the things on my shelves as I'm surrounded by books? And like, oh, if these were all gone in a fire or something, I had to rebuy them. Like, what, it just makes you think about that. And another one that is the main thing that stands out to me in this film is another character, Bill, is talking about like looking over a crowd, like a football match or something, or sports event, and it's just a crowd. It's just a bunch of people. You don't know any of them, but he says, just let your eyes drift across the crowd of people, and they slowly stop and fix on one person, and all of a sudden, that person isn't part of the crowd anymore. They become an individual just like that. And I thought that was a really cool concept.
That's
So
great.
least
Yeah.
favorite, but some really, really interesting discussion points and things that make you think as you're sitting there. You're just like, oh, wow.
Definitely. Yeah, it definitely does a lot of that. It's also my number 11, so I think it's a really good first outing as a filmmaker. It's really solid. Kind of has a lot of the elements of his other films in it, kind of in a more simplified version. It's a
Mm,
70-minute movie, so it's by far his shortest film. It was all shot in 16 millimeter, like you said, black and white. I'm a huge fan of shooting movies that way. It does a lot of cool things, nonlinear structure. I love seeing first movies from directors where they're kind of it kind of forces them to be very creative because they have no budget.
Hmm.
So
yeah.
that's why they shot black and white because it was cheaper. They
Oh,
use
wow.
natural lighting instead of, all these, fancy lights. They're not shooting in a studio, it's all on location. It was basically him and his friends doing it, on the weekends while
Mm,
they were working their day job. So pretty neat to
that's
see
cool.
that. But yeah, I would say it's his weakest film. Bert, what do you have at number 11?
Yeah, well, this may be a little strange because he's my favorite filmmaker, but I do actually have a couple that well, one at least that I would say I dislike, and
Hmm.
that is Tenet.
Oh,
It's
Oh,
not
wow.
it's not a poorly made film, but it's the concept. It's just very confusing when you're watching it. Some parts are just inexplicable, frankly. After I watched the film, I watched like a 25-minute YouTube rundown of every aspect of it to explain it. And so I kind of get what Nolan's going for, but the problem is that it just doesn't feel rewarding. Like I get what he's trying to make
Hmm.
it do, but it's just almost too heady, almost too cerebral.
Hmm.
The action scenes, they're not really that thrilling to begin with. They just look weird. It's like an experimental film, right? I guess is the best way to look at it. It's just so confusing that it's just kind of off-putting. It's not that it's made poorly. I just think that this is an example of, an idea that Nolan had that maybe should have been left on the drawing board. So I don't hate the film, but when I watch it, I just don't get much out of it. Honestly, I give it 1.5 stars just because I just don't enjoy it when I'm watching it.
Gotcha.
Dang.
Gotcha. Appreciate
No,
the
isn't he great?
thoughts. No, yeah. Let's jump to Josh's 11 now.
My 11 is Dunkirk. Yeah, I know, probably surprising. I think all of these are gonna, as we're ranking all these, like, someone's gonna have a surprise in there somewhere. So this, I think I'll have two surprises. So this is the first one. I have it like a 3.5 stars. So again, none of these are bad movies.
Oh wow.
Um, but for me, I saw a couple of you guys have it at 5 stars, and I was like, and I guess I'm kind of in the same boat as you are, Bert, with Tenet, where I'm just like, how'd you guys do it at 5 stars? Um, yeah, for me, it's a really, again, really well-made movie. I think the main things for me was the movie just to me kind of just felt flat the whole way through. The other thing is I know like all of his films involve time or some aspect of that. And for me, like with this, like it's a non-linear storytelling, and I like that aspect. I like that you have to kind of like you when you realize you're like, oh, and you kind of have to like piece things together and figure it out. I really like that aspect of movies. However, in this particular instance, it feels more like he did it because he had to. Like, oh, I have to include some time non-linear aspect here, so we're just going to tell the story in non-linearly. Like, you know what I mean? It kind of feels a
Mm.
little gimmicky to me anyway. So that's kind of why that, and then some of the characters look a little too similar, so it's sometimes a little hard to follow. But that's kind of why I have it.
It's funny you say gimmicky. Reminded me of M. Night Shyamalan. I feel like he's had the reputation of the guy that has the twist ending, and some people regard that as a gimmick. And I think that has kind of hurt him in his career.
Yeah, always having to do that. Like if you made a movie without that, like people would it wouldn't do well because everyone would be expecting it and then be a letdown. So no matter how good the movie was, you'd still be let down because there wasn't an ending like that.
Well,
Right.
plus they're expecting the endings to get even more and more outrageous and
Yeah.
tremendous and all that, and that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good points.
Yeah.
Good points, guys. On to my number 10, which is The Dark Knight Rises. The Dark Knight Rises incorporates elements of several comics that I really like, including Dark Knight Returns, No Man's Land, and Nightfall, but does so all to varying degrees of success. It doesn't always click fully. I think overall, it really does satisfy the storyline from that was started in Batman Begins. So I think it ultimately kind of is a satisfying ending, but one that doesn't hit on every level that I feel like it should. Tom Hardy as Bane, I think is a really unique take on that character and just really interesting. Anne Hathaway, I think, is okay as Catwoman. Marion Cotillard as Talia al Ghul is great, but she's not on screen enough. So I feel like there's certain things it does well, but it doesn't always fully get there for me. Has the biggest scale, has probably the best action of the trilogy as well. And the timeline is just very unclear. Certain plot things just don't fully connect for me, and I don't really fully get what they were trying to go for. But I like the whole idea of it, the whole idea of, a sacrificial hero saving the city, the truth coming out about what happened with Two-Face and that whole thing. I think all that works really well. But it just doesn't ever quite get there for me. It doesn't reach the level of the first two. So that's what I have at number 10.
Cam, what's your star rating on that too? I wondered.
I actually have it at 3.5 right now. So
Yeah.
I have Following at 3, this at 3.5. They're not terrible movies. They're just not quite the greatest of Nolan. So Bert, we're on to your number 10. What do you have?
I've got Following there.
Okay.
And watched this for the first time. It's pretty good. It's got some good reveals. I really like those. Unlike you, Cam, I'm not a big fan of black and white. If it looks really great, that's one thing. But as you said, I mean, this was kind of just some friends that got some money together. I mean, it's full frame black and white too. It looks kind of like a TV show in presentation, but the content is really great for what he put together for this film. And so it's a good low budget mystery film, but just it kind of just ends there for me. I'm at 2.5 stars on that one.
Gotcha. Now we're to Josh. You're number 10, right?
Yes.
Okay.
My number 10 is Memento. This is interesting because, again, really well made film, really well executed. Someone did tell me ahead of time what basically is going on, that like, the color scenes and the black and white scenes, like it's going like this. And so, yeah. And well, it did, but I was still confused.
Yeah.
So I think it was like halfway through the film, and then like it was like, oh, I see what's going. Like everything was starting to click in my mind a little more. But yeah, the plot is really good. The story, like, it grabs your attention. You're like, okay, so what's going on here? You're trying to figure it out. The whoa moment at the end is definitely a whoa moment.
Yeah,
Guy
yeah.
Pearce and Joseph Pantoliano, if I pronounce that right.
Joey Pants.
Great, uh, great performances. I would say this is probably the one that most reminds me of something like a M. Night Shyamalan film. But yeah, a great concept, well executed.
Cool. On to my number 9, which is Insomnia. Insomnia is a really solid crime mystery thriller, and it's by far his most straightforward movie. There's really not a whole lot of like non-linear narrative. It's just like pretty straightforward. It's still got, some great reveals in it. The cast is fantastic. Robin Williams, like I've never seen him before. Hilary Swank is really good here. And Al Pacino really delivers one of the best performances I've ever seen him give. I haven't seen all of his movies, but I've seen a good number. And this is a really good kind of understated, more psychological role for him that he really just knocks out of the park. So don't have a lot to say about it, honestly, just because it's a very straightforward movie, just very well made, solid, doesn't stand out, I guess, is maybe why it's a little lower than some of the other ones. So that's what I have at 9. Bert, give us your number 9.
It is Dunkirk. Look, this is, to me, I think it's a very well-made movie too. It looks great. There's some really intense parts. This, to me, though, it's a lot like Black Hawk Down, where I think that's a tremendous film, but I've only seen it once because it's hard to watch. It's got a lot of that kind of stuff. War films aren't really my genre. I haven't seen that many of them, frankly. So I should say too, I really would like to watch this with a commentary. Maybe I'll need to pull like someone's YouTube commentary or something, because I also think that I would appreciate it and understand it better with a commentary. I feel like I'm missing some obvious things that, Nolan never spoon feeds the audience. And so with a historical film like this, I really need someone sitting next to me going, well, you see, that's the battle of, here's what's happening. Let me take you through it. So, it's a fine film. It's just not really in my wheelhouse. I'm at 3 stars, though. It's very well made. Great music, too.
Great. All right. Josh, on to your number 9.
So this is probably my other surprising one. I have Interstellar at number 9 right now. And it's a stellar film.
Out.
Sorry, I painted. Oh, no. Sorry, I'm okay. I'll be all right.
I'm sorry. I'm sure it'll go up, but right now it's at number 9. Sure. So yeah, it's really the end that ruined it for me. Yeah. So I love everything before that though. So it probably could go a little higher. Right now I have it at 9. The robots like were really cool.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I think Cam, you talked about this on the podcast too, but you don't like the very end where he meets up with his daughter again. Well, you don't like the bookshelf part.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah. Just that whole time travel-esque wormhole thing. Yeah.
Really? Okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's because like the science is like so interesting and fascinating and like true to life as far as we understand it. For everything else with like the gravity and the size and time is different down here versus up there, and all that. Those concepts are like really, really cool. And again, true to life as far as we know. So I think for me, it was like all this like factual science. Like this is probably the most realistic sci-fi film I've ever seen. And then at the end, you get that. Gotcha. It was like sort of
a bridge too far,
fantastical,
too much fiction in the sci-fi.
Yeah, right. In the after all this amazing true science. Yeah. So that's for me. That's why the ending was kind of like, eh.
Okay.
It is still really emotional, so I'll give it that. But I just didn't care for the lack of. I mean, and what can you really do? We don't know how any of that stuff works. So again, you have to do something fantastical. So I'll concede that obviously, but for me, it's just too much of a like what. Yeah. After all this really cool stuff, but some great stuff about the film. I love the robots, Tars and Case, especially Tars, his personality. I thought like movies like Star Trek and Star Wars has just done so much innovation in creature design and droids and stuff like that. It's cool to see a unique robot, something this unique that you think is like, oh, that's kind of weird looking, but and then mixed with the personality, it's just really cool and it's surprisingly mobile.
Yeah, it's pure function. That's not for looks at all, which I love.
Yeah, just some really cool stuff though.
Just even the square.
Yeah, yeah.
Rectangle.
But yeah, the cameo that they kept under wraps, I
Hmm.
was so glad they did. And you see it, and you're like, what? Well, that was a cool moment. I was also with some friends, and afterwards, I didn't understand all the science behind it and everything. And my friend did, so he was like explaining it all. So we had like a really good discussion about that afterwards, and just made for a really cool experience overall. It is kind of mind blowing, and it's an emotional story. Matthew McConaughey gives a great performance and everything. It was just the end for me.
Star rating on that?
I'd say probably four stars.
Okay. That's pretty good.
Great. All right. On to my number 8, which is Batman Begins. Batman Begins, I ended up putting at
Mm.
8. This is an excellent character study on Bruce Wayne. It's a really good psychological story about his journey to becoming Batman. Supporting cast is fantastic. Christian Bale, of course, is great, but Gary Oldman, I think, is flawless casting as Gordon. Michael
Yeah.
Caine as Alfred. Morgan Freeman. Even Katie Holmes, who gets a lot of flack for this, I think she's excellent in it. I think
Me
it's a
too.
really
I
good
I
role
don't
for
get
Yeah,
that
her.
at all. Yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
yeah. So,
yeah.
especially though, Liam Neeson,
Oh,
he just brings such gravitas, and the whole League of Shadows idea, bringing that into
Mhm.
the films, which we hadn't seen in the movies before. It'd been in the
Yeah.
comics, but that whole idea of Batman being a ninja is like it makes a lot of sense. So all that
and it's
works.
dope.
Unfortunately, the action is sorely lacking here. I feel like it's Nolan's poorest action. A lot of quick cutting. It just poorly choreographed. I don't really know what's going on half the time. So a lot of the editing choices I'm not a fan of, and that's something that I'm going to be bringing up more about some of Nolan's other movies too. But that's an issue for me. Has a good score. I still feel like this score is not on the level as the other Batman themes that we've had in movies, like Ben Affleck's Batman or Michael Keaton's Batman have such instantly recognizable scores that while this score is very good, it doesn't quite hit that same kind of iconic level where it's like you can hum it and just instantly. So that's a little
Can't
bit
hum
of
it.
an
It's only two
issue.
notes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Um, but so yeah, his ideas I think are better than his execution here. And the way he directs the actors is very good, but it just doesn't quite live up to some other Batman films. So that's what I have at 8. It's still 4 stars though. We're starting in the 4-star territory now from Insomnia on. So Bert, what do you have at number 8?
I've got Dark Knight Rises. I like this movie quite a bit, but I'm a big Batman fan, and what you said, Cam, really was true. This almost feels like there's too much in one film, but where it really is a problem for me, this in certain areas, is the way the film starts. It starts kind of weird to me. There's this big airplane stunt. It doesn't really feel like the rest of the series. It feels like more of like a Bond stunt, which it's interesting you mentioned that he likes Bond, because that kind of makes sense. But it doesn't really seem like it belongs more in a Mission Impossible film than the Dark Knight movies, right? And then I mentioned this before on the podcast, but Bane's voice was just so strange. And in the theater I saw it in, it was like his voice was like 5 times louder than the rest of the mix. And I mean, everybody was going, "What is going on here?" And I really can't get past that in my mind when I rewatch it. So Bane doesn't really work for me. His voice is actually really strange in general, and it doesn't really work for me. And then the introduction of Batman here, Bruce Wayne, when you see him, he's like a cripple, and I knew that it was just like a ploy, like they were just doing like a ruse, right? Except that it wasn't, and I'm like, what? Like, so he just let himself go, and it just like, why is the character there? He should be out like really really hitting the streets, like that's what he's supposed to do. So that was kind of a strange introduction. The whole scene, and several scenes involving the pit that he falls in. I get like, I mean, character wise and emotion wise a little bit why that's involved, but it just didn't do a lot for me excitement wise for a Batman film. So I mean, it's got some really good stuff. It's just not among the best of Nolan. I'm still though at I didn't write it down, but probably 3.5 stars on that one.
Cool. Josh, what do you have at number 8?
I have Insomnia. Sometimes I'm a little weird with my rankings because I'll throw something that's slightly lower in stars above something higher. So that's kind of what happened here. Like probably put this at like 3.5 stars, maybe 4. Yeah, this is the first time I had seen it. I hadn't seen it before. This was his only, with Oppenheimer outstanding. This was only his only one I hadn't seen. But pretty much, yeah, exactly what you said, Cameron. It's a really solid film. It is his most straightforward one, so I guess I also have the least to say about it. But yeah, the performances were excellent. I guess the main thing that stood out to me about this film was, I guess I could call it the impactful realism of it. There's certain films that like are able to capture this, and I don't know how they do it. I can't explain it here either. But just certain things either that other films don't do or say, that certain films do choose to do or say or show, etc. Like for example, in this one, the deaths feel weighty and impactful. Even the beginning with Kay
Mm.
Connell's, like just the way they portrayed it or the things around it. Like maybe it was the pauses, the lingers on faces, but you really, it's like, I don't want to say it's like a person that, that died, obviously, but that, I guess it's as close to that as you can get from in a movie. But it just has that like a real person died. That's kind of what it feels like. And that, just kind of sits with you like that. And not a lot of movies, I don't know if they tried to do that, but not a lot of movies succeed at it, especially action films where people are just dying, high body counts. But
Mhm.
I think that and some of the lines that they said struck me as well. That was really, I think, the main thing that I got from this film was just like the way they portrayed the realism and impactfulness of it.
Excellent stuff. On to my number seven. It is Interstellar. Interstellar is a heavy sci-fi drama, kind of also a dystopian sci-fi film at the same time. It's kind of an
Yeah.
interesting blend. I love the whole idea of this, that love is greater than time and space. That's just such a great concept.
Yeah.
I just feel like it gets away from it. It gets so big and kind of, that word again, heady comes to mind of just, there's a lot of ideas, scientific jargon, and like things going on here that it sort of lost me on this most recent rewatch. Great visual effects, though. Really, I think from what I was looking at, some of the behind the scenes, it looked like they're kind of using what they're using in Star Wars now with the volume. They're like an early version of that where they're projecting the space field outside the ship that they built on set so that the actors are seeing the space
Oh,
outside of the
oh,
windows, which is a cool use of it. This was years ago that they were doing this, so he must have kind of pioneered that whole idea. Stirring and powerful score. Zimmer just, wow, he blew me away with the score. The organ is just so great. What a great choice. Outside the box choice. So good. It just doesn't balance the great story they have with the spectacle as well as I feel like it could have and should have. The editing choices when we're switching back and forth between space and Earth don't always quite work for me. I thought they could have done that a little bit better, stayed in one area a little bit longer. They're going back and forth a lot, especially in a certain scene. And he does that a lot, the cross cutting between two sequences in his movies, but it just for some reason didn't quite mesh here. So, epic scale. I love the IMAX footage that he switches to. I've got the Blu-ray. It does it a little too often. It becomes a little disorienting at times because you're going like inside the spaceship, outside the spaceship, and it's going back and forth. So it doesn't work here as well as it does in some of his later movies, but I appreciate what he's going for. So yeah, the ending too, Josh, I agree. It gets a little too out there for me, the ending. And it's a long movie and it starts to feel long. They could have cut that ending down a little bit, like him getting to the station and then him go to the house and his daughter getting, it's like the hospital scene should have just happened a little sooner because I really do like that
mm.
scene. And then ending with Anne Hathaway's character is a little odd to me, but still a 4-star movie, still a movie I greatly enjoy, but it just has some issues for me. So now we're on to Bert's number 7.
And I've got Insomnia at 7. I don't know that either of you mentioned this really, but it's kind of an interesting choice. Insomnia. I guess it's because they decided to put the story in Alaska and there's too much daylight, right? And he can't sleep. They show scenes of that at times, which affects his mind and how he's trying to think through all this and that kind of thing. And the film does have a great look to it. There's some really great misty, kind of foggy scenes that are very atmospheric. And Pacino is stellar. He's really good here, and I like the plot. It's an interesting quandary that killer sees the detective, but he sees him kill his partner, but then he's got something on him, and so that's sort of like the overriding thing. I still think in real life he'd say, I don't care if you saw it, I'm still taking you in, and I'll just deal with the consequences. But then there's no story, then there's no movie. But I do enjoy the journey and kind of the ins and outs of that sort of quandary that he's in. One thing I wish was different about this is that Robin Williams is one of my favorite actors of all time. I just don't like him as sort of this pervy murderer. And I'm not saying he does a poor job of it. He's good, but it's hard to get past that after all the comedies and some really good drama too in there, where he's not playing that kind of role. So he's not bad. It's just tough to accept, I guess. So I'm not sure why he was casted. So it kind of works for me. And I should mention too, the ending of this film is very moving. This is a solid drama. I just wouldn't say it's transcendent like most of the ones ahead of this on my list are. I think I'm 3 stars on this one.
When you say that about Robin Williams, it made me think. I think it might have been because he is such an unlikely cast. Because like the points his character is making is like, oh, I'm not a pervert, like, we're just friends, And I think maybe that was his other filmography kind of lends itself to, so you kind of believe him more, or there's more of that. Not moral quandary, more of that. I guess like internal subconscious fight in your mind, or
Acceptance.
like what
Yeah.
side are you on, like how much truthful is he being,
Right.
and maybe it lends itself to that. I don't know.
That could very well be why they did it. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
You guys like him as that in that role there?
I do. It's just different. I like any actor that kind of stretches themselves like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so I'm okay with it. If he had done that like in 5 movies, that would be kind of weird. But to have this one where he's this weird, different kind of character, I kind of like it.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm okay.
I don't
with
hate it, but I just like I'd rather see someone else, I think, in that role.
Right.
I think someone
hear
else would
you.
have definitely been creepier.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Josh, you're on to number 7 for you now, right?
Yes. So I said I had 2 weird ones, or hot takes, and I guess maybe I have 3. So at number 7, I have The Dark Knight. And I'm definitely an oddball here as far as the Dark Knight trilogy. This is my least favorite. I mean, obviously, it's the first one I mentioned. This is my least favorite of the 3. And usually it's people's like second favorite, or usually their favorite.
Right.
But it's a solid movie, not disparaging any of that at all. I'll get into why I like the other ones more later. But Heath Ledger obviously gives an Oscar-worthy performance, and he got it posthumously. I always want to say posthumously or post whatever instead of posthumous. But I guess for me, it's really the Joker's movie, and it's really the movie that Batman is the least awesome. He's losing, and that's kind of what you want to do in a as George Lucas and everyone, you kind of want to do the darker movie second. So obviously that's what they're doing here. For me, I don't know, just because it's coming off the like awesome, like, oh yeah, Batman of the Batman Begins, and now he's kind of like losing, getting beaten up and stuff, and not doing as much awesome, cool things. But the story of why the Joker has the scars, that was definitely a standout scene for me. The more dilemma at the end with the 2 boats as civilians and the prisoners, it was a really good scene. And obviously, Joker at the hospital, where he's trying to blow it up. That was improv, right? Because it didn't actually go off, and it was supposed to. And so he did that whole thing, which is like probably the funniest part of the entire trilogy. And it was not intended. And he just played it up, and that was so good. So yeah, I do enjoy the movie. It's just the one I enjoyed the least out of the 3, I guess I should say.
Gotcha. Well, that's a good segue into my number 6, which is also The Dark Knight. I find this to be the movie that kind of changed the comic book genre in a very significant way. It's a very important film, and I think I appreciate it more than I enjoy it. Is kind of how I would say it, because they're loosely adapting the Long Halloween story from the comics, which is my all-time favorite Batman comic ever written.
Oh, wow.
Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale did a fantastic job with that. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. And they do their own version of it, certainly, but it's really the basics of that story are there. It's Batman, Gordon, and Harvey Dent all fighting the mob. And there's this kind of crazed serial killer out there that they're also having to deal with. It's kind of like a wild card. So in the comic book, it's not Joker, it's a different character. But the way they utilize Joker here is great. Of course, like you said, Heath Ledger's fantastic in the role. I love the whole order versus chaos idea of Batman and Joker. It's explored really well. I think Aaron Eckhart is for me the standout as Harvey Dent. I think his character arc through the film is really fantastic. I'm just following him the whole way through and really buy into it. Maggie Gyllenhaal is a step down from Katie Holmes, unfortunately for me.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Which, yeah, is not great. The action here is better than Batman Begins, but it's still not the level that it needs to be at, I feel like, for a Batman movie. The Shanghai sequence is really good. The truck flip, that whole car chase is really well executed. But again, a lot of the hand-to-hand combat stuff just kind of falls flat for me, especially when you compare it to stuff like Batman v Superman that we get later.
Right.
Is that what you mean by some of the action you expect for Batman? Is that more what you're talking about, like
Yes.
the hand-to-hand stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Especially since Batman's supposed to be a
Okay,
ninja. He's supposed to be like the greatest fighting Batman ever. And we just don't ever
that's a good
really
point.
see that. So
I
it's
agree
just,
with you on that. Like for a series that's an action series,
yeah,
that's probably the least effective part of it, which is kind of interesting because it's a much cherished trilogy by
true.
myself and most people.
True. Yeah. And
It's kind of interesting.
it's a testament to Nolan and his direction and
Yeah,
the writing and the acting,
right,
because all that
right.
stuff is so well done that it
Mhm.
doesn't really affect the movie that much. It's maybe a little too realistic. I think maybe they were going for too much
Mhm.
realism there.
Right,
Um,
right.
but yeah, great themes. It's kind of a post 9/11 allegory on surveillance state and that whole thing. It has one of the best movie endings. I get chills every time I hear Gordon say "A Dark Night," and then he goes off in the movie, and it's just
Mhm.
a perfect ending. This was heavily inspired by Michael Mann's Heat, which is a movie I highly recommend if you have not seen it. It's a better movie, and
Oh,
it's
interesting.
very, very well done. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Dark Knight. Bert, we're on to your number 6, right?
All right, this is where they start to get good. My 6 and 5 I struggle so much with, but I put The Prestige at 6. And this is a fantastic film. Has a great look to it. Characters are very complex. This is one of those where rival magicians, they're flawed and do some pretty reprehensible things at times to each other. It's funny. It reminded me. I was thinking about it. You ever see the movie Changing Lanes with Ben Affleck and Samuel Jackson? Oh, you haven't.
No.
Yeah, it's two guys that I think starts out with a road rage thing, and then throughout the film, it's not a comedy. It's kind of along these lines of like they do underhanded things to, except they're even
Hmm.
more reprehensible, and it just kind of goes down the drain throughout the entire film. But it's an intense and good drama. But anyway, there's a sadness to this film. It's very bleak, and I think that makes it difficult to watch, of course. One thing that's really interesting is this Fallon character, and this is full spoilers, so if anybody hasn't seen it,
Spoiler
uh,
alert.
yeah, spoiler
Yeah,
alert.
please stop here.
Yeah. So Fallon is played also by Bale, and he's kind of the heart of the film. Fallon is, as far as he's maybe the good guy, the one that has some values or whatever you want to call it, but he's also not the main figure. It's very clever how Nolan treats that character. I think when I first watched it, I didn't know at first that it was Bale because of the way it's treated, and he's kind of cloaked and that kind of thing. I would like to at some point, maybe on my next viewing, I'll watch to see, because it's hard to tell which character is Fallon. Meaning, sometimes they switch, right? The two twins switch, and so sometimes I'm like, oh, he was Fallon right then, and then wait, was he? Like it's almost like it'd be interesting to have a scorecard of like, okay, I think that's the one that's Fallon, the one that actually loves the girl. I mean,
Right.
it'd be interesting. It's just one of those like sort of little big things within a movie that you could study almost. I love the depiction of Tesla. I feel like this is proof too that Bowie can act, because I mean I love Labyrinth, but
Hmm.
it doesn't really showcase Bowie's acting chops. And then Hugh Jackman, his dual portrayal here, I mean, it's even more impressive, I think, than Bale's. I actually, I know it's Jackman, but when I was watching it this last time, I actually looked it up to make sure. That's how good this guy is, right? Because I thought, wait, they didn't. Am I wrong? Is that actually not Hugh Jackman? And then I've verified that it is him. But that's the how good of a performance he puts on. I've never seen Jackman play a character like that, and it's so interesting. I think they might use mild prosthetics or something too, just a little bit. It got me. That's what got me thinking. Wait, am I thinking this actually is Jackman and it's not? So that all that stuff's really good. But ultimately, it does leave me with a pit in my stomach over some of the things that happen in the movie. And that again just makes it tough to watch. Still, this is a tremendous film. I mean, I'm at 4.5 stars. It's a tremendous film. Almost made my top 5. And I should say it's a twin film to The Illusionist, and I think The Illusionist does this subject matter a lot better. It doesn't lean so much into sort of the sci-fi elements of it,
Gotcha. Great.
of magic.
Um,
Yeah.
All right. Josh's number 6. What do you have?
So my six right now, after one viewing, is Oppenheimer.
Oh,
So I wasn't sure exactly where to put it. For sure, the top three that I have are just like so dear to me. I don't know if it's the right word, but like I'm so like emotionally connected to, and it's like in my in
sure.
my heart kind of thing. So it definitely couldn't top that on one viewing. But I think this one and the one I have next are kind of similar in some aspects, which I'll explain when I get to my number five. But I thought they did a really good job. All the acting is phenomenal. If you don't know anything about them, they do a good, which I didn't really, except that he's the father of the atomic bomb, and he has his quote. That's really all I knew about him. But they do a good job of kind of like getting into it. You're not really there's like a lot of science and stuff. It wasn't like confused at any point or anything like that where I'm like not understanding what they're talking about. I mean, sure, at some points you don't know what they're talking about because it's beyond you, but he doesn't make it confusing. This is probably the most actors I've ever seen in a film that I could either name or recognize. I was blown away every time I like see someone else. I'm like, I know you, I know you.
It was like
So like
JFK, basically.
I don't know, I haven't seen it, but I
Oh,
will
okay.
say yes. It seems like everyone wanted to be in this movie, and of course, all the stuff that all the actors are saying about it. They're just lauding it, and rightly so. Ludwig, I'm gonna butcher his last name, Göransson.
Yep.
His score, he is just. I don't want to say replaced Zimmer. I mean, it seems like he kind of has, as far as like being hired, but I feel like I was listening to it after a little bit as well. Like this score, just it has that same evocative, experimental, like that kind of creativeness that Zimmer has captured in especially
Mhm.
Nolan's films. And I feel like Ludwig did it here, even with
Mhm.
Tenet as well. But yeah, it was very engaging and gripping of a score. So yeah, really good
Good.
film. And for anyone that's wondering, hard break from earlier films, and he's got sex and nudity in here. Unfortunately, it is avoidable
It's
mostly.
unavoidable. It was
Um,
unavoidable. I can't
it was
imagine the director
unavoidable.
saying that.
No. Oh my gosh. No, I mean like if you're watching it, it was avoidable. There wasn't
Oh,
any reason he didn't need to include it in here, but he did. But if you're watching it, it is pretty much avoidable with like one or two caveats where someone says something. There's like three scenes, so
gotcha.
it can be done.
Gotcha. All right, on to my number 5, which is Memento. This is a superb sort of like modern noir detective mystery movie that,
Mm.
unravels as it goes along. I just adore the use again of black and white and color. It really is just a unique and a visual representation of what's going on in the story, which I think is great. Has that great nonlinear narrative structure. I don't know if you guys have seen the video of him drawing it on the chalkboard. That's kind of going
Oh yeah.
around. It's on YouTube. You can find
Oh,
it. He kind of draws the line of how the movie works and everything, and it's really interesting. So yeah, he does a great job with that. He uses kind of every technique at his disposal to tell this very specific story about a specific character. I mean, we're very much with Guy Pearce the whole way through,
yeah.
and I like that. It's all about perspective, really. I think
Yeah.
that's really well done. Again, this is, I think, his second movie, so it's a very limited budget he's working with.
Hmm.
And again, he's just using everything he can, and it kind of forces him to be creative and use all these elements in specific ways that he just does a great job with. Like you mentioned, Josh, the cast is excellent. Carrie-Anne Moss is wonderful here
Mm.
too. Just a
Hmm.
really, really great performance. This movie is very real, grounded, very gritty story, and the
Yeah.
idea never loses sight of the emotion of what he's going through, which is what I like.
Hmm.
Some of the other movies, I mentioned,
Mm.
the kind of ideas kind of get away from him a little bit, and it kind of lose touch with the human side of it, but this one does not at all. And yeah, mind-blowing ending. I mean, just one of those endings that kind of just puts you on the floor and you're just like, what? No, what happened? I can't believe this is how this ends. But it's great. It's great. It just works so well. It totally makes sense. So it's a great movie. Memento, and at number 5, 4.5 stars.
Are you thought the ending? Are you talking about where we discover what Lenny really is?
Yes.
Yeah, I
Yes.
just want to
Yeah,
make sure that that's what you meant. Yeah,
right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just such a shock. I mean, when we discover
yeah,
what actually happened.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great stuff. So, all right, that's my number 5. Now we're on to Bert's number 5.
I've got Inception at number 5.
Okay.
This is a very layered film to say the least. It's just kind of a mind job. I mean, this film. It's also an analysis of mental health. There's
Sure.
so much so many deep things going on here. when you step back and think about it, this movie really is it makes you consider what would happen if you weren't sure that you were actually enjoying your life and your children and your wife, but you're actually just in a dreamlike state of them, kind of, almost like the Matrix. Now that I think about it, right? There's some serious heavy issues here. I mean, there's some heavy things going on. Nolan leaves it open at the end, which I actually I like that here. You know, I mean, kind of open as far as whether it's still in a dream or whatnot. There's some really great action. The film just warrants repeat viewings. I mean, it's a masterpiece, and it's not even in my top 4. It is number 82 on my all-time favorite movies list, and I'm at 4.5 stars. So it is one of his best. Yeah.
Great stuff. Moving on to Josh and your number 5.
My number 5 is Tenet. I guess where this and Oppenheimer are similar for me, at least right now, as I'm kind of going through everything, is like just the mastercraft that he has through both of these films is just fully on display. Like, I think after I watched, I don't remember which viewing, but at some point after seeing Tenet, probably twice at least, I just like came to the conclusion, okay, my favorite movie, which is yet to be named, is my favorite, obviously. But I feel like back in 2020, I feel like this was his best. I guess the distinction there being part of it, like you do have to watch it multiple times in order to like really understand everything. And I mean, I've seen it 3 times and I still don't understand everything. And I had like a YouTube video that like explained one aspect of it. And I'm like, yeah, but I need to see it. I need to see it play out. I can't
Exactly.
make sense of this. The something in the scene at the very end as they're like, okay, A group and B group, and I still have like I still can't understand everything that's going on there with that. But
you know, it's like you have the film and then the YouTube video to explain it. You need another YouTube video to explain the YouTube video.
Yeah,
That's what we're missing, Josh.
Or I need his drawing where he did it in Memento. I just need him to like do that and
Can you
explain
sketch
how
it?
these
Yeah.
things like can these have how could like explain okay this and then and go back
Yeah.
and forth, even though it's not
Yeah.
like that in the movie. But I don't know. Not to say it's a bad thing. It's just it does warrant more viewings.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just so I guess the comparison to Oppenheimer here was that they're both just absolutely stellarly made films, but they don't tug on my heartstrings in the same way as some of the other ones do, and that could just be because of multiple viewings and stuff like that. But yeah, that's where I got it at. And now, John David Washington, is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does an excellent job here. Robert Pattinson does an excellent job here. If no one, people who didn't know already, this is the film that they discovered he can act. He's not just Edward from Twilight. And obviously, Kenneth Branagh does a fantastic job here. I feel like he should have gotten a nomination here for his role as this villain. Like there's some scenes where you're like, oh crap, like you're scared of him, and he does that like scarily well, no pun intended. So yeah, great film.
Good stuff. All right, guys. Now we're on to our number 4s. So my number 4 is The Prestige. This is such a great kind of just twisty mystery, set in all of the Victorian era, and the magicians and the whole idea of the movie is like, movies are magic tricks, right? So we're kind of, it's a little, dealing with kind of a layered thing here as well. Jackman and Bale are just stellar in the lead roles. Their rivalry is just the stuff of legend. What they go through to get to the other one is just kind of crazy. But they're kind of obsessive, and that's kind of, again, another thing about Nolan's movies. They kind of do deal with people who are kind of obsessed about something.
Right.
Batman, obviously. Memento is all about, this obsession this guy has. So it's a great version of that. It's maybe the best. Rebecca Hall and Scarlett Johansson are both amazing in it as well. You mentioned David Bowie. I really like Andy Serkis in this as well. He's got kind of a smaller role, but he's really good. And of course, Michael Caine, who's a staple of most of Nolan's films, is great here as well as Cutter. Really like him in this. So it's one of those movies that just keeps you guessing till the end as it unravels. You're kind of like, where is this going? How is this going to end? And it's a super satisfying ending, which I feel like for movies like this is very difficult. But they totally pull it off. It's very well written. It's a totally different experience when you rewatch it, right? It's like the first time you're just kind of trying to get what's going on, and then you get the reveal, and then when you watch it again, knowing that it's a totally different film, like you're totally going, whoa, okay, so that's him. And like you were saying, Bert, the two characters Bale is playing, and it's just a very, very unique experience. So Huge fan of it. It's very well paced too. It's just over 2 hours, but it never feels either rushed or dull or boring. It always keeps your attention. Jonathan Nolan, his brother, wrote this. This guy deserves a lot more praise than he gets because, like I said, he's a writer on a lot of these films,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's a really smart writer. I mean,
yep.
really intelligent. The
Hmm.
way he structures these films and writes the dialogue and everything is just excellent. So, yeah, huge fan of the Prestige. Bert, what do you have at your number four?
Well, at number four, I've got Lenny. Lenny. That's my Joey Pants impression. That wasn't that good, but
Nice,
that's I got
That's
nice.
pretty
Memento at
good.
number four.
Okay.
Lenny. What a unique film. And unlike Tenet, this one to me, it made sense. I mean, you got to watch it a few times to kind of get all of it. But it's extremely rewarding what the film puts you through. And I guess that's the difference for me. Honestly, I don't know how Nolan convinced any studio to make this film, because this obviously is a much bigger budget, much bigger actors. I think Guy Pearce, didn't he just win an Oscar right before this for LA Confidential?
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh
And
wow.
so he gets an Oscar winner and all this. And he's pitching this, and it's like, well, you see, the whole thing is told backwards, except also there'll be a forward narrative, which we'll put that in black and white. They must have been like, you're out of your mind. Next. I don't know how he got this film made. But the brilliance of this film is that if you reverse the order of the scenes, and there is a cut of it actually on an older DVD has it, where they reverse the scenes and put them in like normal chronological order. If you do that, the film doesn't make any sense, because even though it's told in reverse, Nolan cleverly still withholds pertinent details and kind of strings them along throughout the film, so that by the end, when you're watching the first scene, you're finally finding out the ending. It's just just brilliant. I mean, it's just off the charts.
Yeah.
So that's why I've got it. This one's so high. I mean, it's a 5-star film for me. I got it number 45 on my all-time list. I was thinking of other examples of somebody that is a spoiler again here, but kind of a monster, but you don't realize it until either part of the way through the film, or at the end of the film. And yet you're kind of cheering for the person throughout the film, at least until you find that out. Other examples I thought of were Let Me In, which is brilliant, and then Session 9, which I don't think you had seen, Cam. It's a horror film,
No,
but
but I remember you talking
also,
about it. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
very kind of the same thing like that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Great. All right. On to Josh's number four.
At number four, I also have The Prestige. Even though I still said Tenet was his best, I think for me the reason, I guess two reasons why this one I have at number four instead of Tenet would just be that I guess the amount of no pun intended with his themes, but the time for me and how many times I've seen it and digested the film and stuff like that, engaged with it with other people, and just the I guess the tightness of it. It's just all around amazing. There's not there you can't point to something and say there's an error here, or there's something wrong, or he should have done something different. Like it's just so tightly, perfectly made. So I don't want to repeat everything you said, Cam. I just agree with it. I liked the point you made, Bert, about just the used a different word, but the sadness or like the gravity, the weightiness of the film. And I know for me, I thought, and I guess maybe the reason I'll go back and watch it is because they maybe more with, I guess with both of them, but with maybe with Hugh Jackman's character a little bit more. There's like that, and Michael Caine's character. There's that element of magic and wonder. Like they still try to have that spirit about them, even though like and it slowly degrades as they're more at each other's throats. But I thought there was a good balance of that wonder with the weightiness of it. Even though I get the weightiness is more overarching, the more longer lasting emotion as far as like the
Yeah.
time frame of the film. But I did this is another one I didn't know the spoiler or anything. So like you get to the
Mm.
end and I was just blown away. I was like, what? And I like had to have my friend like just say it so I like believed it. Kind of like one of those things. I was like, no, wait, does that mean? And then
You were in shock. Yeah.
yeah, I was just like, oh my gosh, no, wait, really? So, and yeah, like you said, watching it again, you can kind of see him be like, okay, so at that point, he was the good guy, and that one he was the bad version of him. Yeah, it's just so interesting, and because like he does such a good job, no one and Bale and everyone in that does such a good job of making it believable that it's spoilers again, but we already said that, but that it's one guy, and that like,
Yeah.
oh, and like he is having an affair with Scarlett Johansson's character, and he does, and like they just balance that so well that, and again, like you said, kind of not like giving us a real clear shot of
Fallon.
Fallon.
Fallon,
Yeah.
yes, because they don't give us like a clear shot, like up
Yep.
of Fallon. They do a good job with that, and then I think it's interesting to see the breadcrumbs like in movies like this, and when you go back and you're
Yeah.
like, and it's fun watching it with friends too, because who don't know movies like this, because as you already know, you've already seen it, you're seeing the breadcrumbs, and like so often with movies like this, when I'm showing to someone who hasn't seen it yet, I'm like, oh my gosh, they know. They must know. That was so obvious. Oh my gosh, they know the ending. It's ruined. And then, of course, they
Right.
don't because they haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to catch the little breadcrumbs, and then you're kind of like freaking out because you think they caught it too. I think the biggest one is when he traps Fallon and buries him alive, and it's kind of like, oh, we haven't. He's just kind of like the helper friend who's around. So why does Christian Bale's character care so much about him? Why is he like, oh no, get him out?
This
You
is
know,
Fallon.
yeah. I was like, okay. I mean, obviously we don't want him to die, but like it was like you cared a little
Right.
more than I thought you would there. So that's
Right.
I think probably the biggest breadcrumb that may make you go, huh. But for me watching it, it was just like it was one of the things where and the movies do such a good job of this, where it's like you see something and you go, huh. But then the movie moves on quickly and you don't have a chance to
Uh-huh.
think about it because
Yeah.
you caught up in paying attention. So I really like when movies do that. This one, of course, does it well here with like there's so many twists and reveals and everything going on. It's just a really well made movie.
Josh, have you seen The Illusionist?
I have not.
I think you have,
It's
Cam,
on my
right?
list,
Yep.
but
Yeah. I pushed that film because it's in my top 10 of all time, and it
oh
deals
wow.
with the same subject matter of magic, and it's just much lesser known, and it's a lot
Uh-huh.
more arty, and the music is just astounding. So yeah, I just really recommend that one. I
Okay.
have to keep plugging it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right, guys. On to my number three. It is Tenet. Tenet is my number three Nolan film. So this is what I like to call a vibes movie. In other words, the plot doesn't matter, characters don't matter. It just feels good to watch it. Basically.
I have those.
Uh,
I have those. Yeah.
yeah. There's those movies. There's a great YouTuber. His name's Patrick Willems. He has a whole like hour-long video on vibes movies, and this is one of them.
Mm,
It's just a really great looking movie.
mm.
First of all, it's shot beautifully. It has a great score. Ludwig Göransson did this score as well and did a fantastic job with it. It's just cool characters doing cool stuff. I just like watching the movie. I can't explain it to you. I really don't really know what it's about, what's going on half the time.
Oh, okay.
But
I thought you were going to explain it to us, Cam. At number three, I
no.
thought you'd
I'm
bring in
not.
the
No,
explanation.
I'm not the guy to explain this movie. They had to. I was watching some behind the scenes earlier today. They had to show previs to the crew to show them like, okay, here's that character, and that's him now, and that's him in the, he's going backwards here, like just so they could understand how to like make the set and like shoot certain things. Like I had to
Mm.
go to all this detail of pre-visualization of all these sequences, which is just
Oh,
incredible.
interesting.
But yeah, like you said, Bert, perfectly. It's a very experimental movie. Nolan's the only guy who could make this. No one else could make this
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
They gave him $200 million to make this
What?
film.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they gave him. This is like his biggest budget he's ever had, and
Wow.
they ended up releasing it, during COVID, and it made hardly any money.
Yeah.
So it's just, but I just love that Nolan can do this. That's one of the reasons I love Nolan, is because he's one of the only filmmakers that studios will just let him do whatever he wants to do.
Apparently, yeah.
Which is just incredible. No one else is like that. So I just really enjoy it for its ambition. Again, for the
Sure.
way it looks, I really enjoy all the performances are really good. They're just, again, characters I really like, even though they don't have really a lot of backstory or even like much of a character arc or anything like that going on. It's just cool
Yeah.
to watch, these guys do these really weird things. I mean, all the action, you had to learn every action sequence backwards, and Robert Pattinson learned to drive backwards for his sequence. I mean, like really crazy
That's
stuff that
crazy.
they went through to make this movie.
Hmm.
I really, like you said, Josh, Kenneth Branagh is just fantastic here as the bad guy. Elizabeth Debicki is very good as well. This is sort of Nolan's, the closest we've gotten to a Nolan Bond film. I feel like it's kind of a spy
Mm.
thing. There's a lot of intrigue
Oh
going
yeah.
on and subterfuge and that kind of thing. So I feel like it's Nolan's take on a kind of Bond or Mission Impossible type of a story. So yeah, it just kind of takes everything to another level. Again, the practical stunt work and effects blend seamlessly with the digital effects. Great stunts and action. Really like the whole structure of it. It's just so unique. I just like it when people take big swings, and this is a big swing Nolan took, and it worked for me. I get why it doesn't work for other people. Totally
Okay.
makes sense, but it is another one that requires a rewatch because the more you watch it, the more you understand it.
Yeah, I
On this
probably should rewatch
most
it.
recent rewatch, I started to sort of get what they
Ah,
were going for, I think. So yeah, just a unique and thrilling kind of time travel type of a movie. So that's
yeah.
what I had at 3. All right, Bert, what's your number 3?
It's The Dark Knight, and you mentioned vibes. I will say my top 3 Nolan films. There are personal reasons why they're so high for me, and not maybe for other people. With Dark Knight, interestingly enough, a lot of it is Chicago. Those scenes like where the truck flips and that kind of thing on LaSalle Street. I mean, I've gone to visit that location and some others in Chicago, and I love that when I'm driving through Chicago, which I do periodically, I can look down LaSalle Street and there's where that truck flipped. I just love that kind of stuff. And the underground scenes, like I've driven those roads. It's great. The script is so excellent for like a superhero action film. It's so tight, so good, and I love all the practical stunts. Heath Ledger is, I mean, it's hard to make a best ever villains list, but he would be maybe right at the top ever out of any genre. He's just truly scary. I felt scared in the theater while I was watching him. It's a 5-star film, my number 11 film of all time.
Okay, that's Bert's number 3. Now we're on to Josh, your number 3 pick.
My number 3, and all 3 of these were hard to pick
Mhm.
to rank here. My number 3 is Batman Begins. I don't know that I actually saw Michael Keaton's Batman first. I think this may have been my
Mm.
first theatrical or movie Batman. That would be interesting, and that also explains why Michael Keaton is my Alfred and Gary Oldman is my Commissioner Gordon.
Michael Caine.
Like those are.
You said Michael Keaton. Michael Caine is
I'm
your
sorry.
Alfred. Yeah.
Yes, Michael Caine is my Alfred. That would be
Keaton would
weird.
be a good Alfred though.
I feel like he would be an interesting Alfred. He's almost at the age where he could pull that off. Um,
Definitely.
yeah, but for me, I don't know, just everything. This is Batman at his coolest. Like obviously you got the totally different Batmobile style compared to all the other ones. The Tumbler, everything is just so cool about this movie, and like obviously that line about the Tumbler where he's like, "What is he driving? A black tank."
Tank Man.
Yes.
Thanks, man.
And I know people are like, "Oh, it's not really a Batmobile." Whatever, I don't care. It's just cool. I thought they did a good job with the score. Molosses if I pronounce that track right, is just like don't listen to that while you're driving. It's not, especially on the freeway. It's not a good idea. It's just like get your heart racing and like
Mhm.
amazingness. I don't know. I didn't really notice until you said it, Cameron, that the action is kind of missing in some of these movies, or at least compared to other Batmans. And I guess maybe that was because this is the first time I really watched Batman. I didn't really grow up watching the animated series or anything like that. Just kind of like knowing about Batman. But maybe it's just because like everything else in the movie, which I think you alluded to as well, is just like the story and everything is just so well plotted and done that I don't, at least me, I didn't notice the lack of action that much. And Killian Murphy does an amazing job as Scarecrow here, the like
Yeah.
legitimately scary Scarecrow.
Yep.
I liked the way that they did that, where it was like, I like the way he did a lot of things where he took it out of like I guess the more fantastical elements and made him a little more grounded, like Scarecrow with like the gas and everything, and the mask. It's just like really cool concepts. But yeah, for me, I don't know. This is just great film. Batman, just all time coolness.
Yeah.
Great stuff. All right, on to my number 2, which is Inception. And this is a 5-star film. It is a genius, mind-bending dream heist movie, which is so cool. What a cool blending. He does this thing where he blends these genres, right? Like we talked about with Tenet, like a spy movie with this weird sci-fi angle. This is much the same. It's a heist movie. you got the crew, you got the thing they're going after, but it's all in someone's dreams. Just unlike anything I've seen before, and it plays into all of Nolan's strengths as a filmmaker. Fantastic direction of the cast. It's a big ensemble cast again, and you feel like everyone gets their moment to shine. You understand every character, what they're all about, what their role is on the team, a little bit of their backstory. It's all just very well done, which is difficult when you're dealing with that many characters to not kind of get lost. And DiCaprio, I think, gives easily one of his top 3 best performances here. You're just so engrossed in what he's going through as a character. It's just relatable. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a big standout. He has a great role here, as well as Tom Hardy, and they're kind of back and forth between those 2 characters is a lot of fun. Again, Cillian Murphy doing a fantastic job in his role. Ken Watanabe shows up there. And the MVP for me, though, might be Marion Cotillard again. And her role is just really interesting to watch. That character and how she's, we get to see who she really is, but then we see his projection of her in the dreams as well. And just a really, really great nuanced performance there. So it's very emotionally engaging. Again, it's kind of really a story about a husband and a father trying to get back to his children. It has stunning visuals. The hallway spinning gravity fight is just crazy to watch. It's so cool that they really built that, and really shot it in there. It's just really, really a spectacular sequence. The car chase, which suddenly includes a train, that starts coming down the road. Just these kind of crazy visuals that I've never seen before in a movie. The whole snow fortress battle. I like that we get so many different locations. We're in Europe, then we're in the Middle East, we're in the city, then we're in the rain and the snow and the mountains. And, it's just so many different elements of it. And it all just works really well. I like how they hide the exposition in one character who's asking all the questions that the audience is asking throughout the whole film. She just wants to know what's going on, whose subconscious are we going into, what's, and it's just, but it hides the exposition so that it doesn't feel like you're talking down to the audience. It feels like you're just explaining things to, one of the characters that happens to be along for the ride. So just really clever writing again. And another iconic, this score from Zimmer is probably the most copied. I feel like every trailer had the big horns, after this. So it just has all that stuff. Bert, you mentioned this ambiguous ending. I love the ending as well. I'm a huge fan of ambiguous endings, but there's a theory out there that might explain what's actually happening in that scene. So Dom has the top, right? As we suppose it's his totem, that lets him know if he's in a dream or not.
Exactly.
We find out, if you pay attention, that's actually not his totem. It's his wife's totem that he took from a safe. That she locked it away. His totem, the theory goes, is his wedding ring. And he is not wearing his wedding ring in that final sequence. And all of the dream sequences, he is wearing his wedding ring. So if you go by that logic, he is not dreaming at the end, which is cool. But again, I like the ambiguity of it. They never tell us that specifically, but it's there if you very much pay attention. Just an all-time great movie, a movie I remember vividly seeing in theaters and have watched numerous times since. And again, 5-star movie. So one of my favorites of all time.
Great pick. Yeah.
All right. We're on to Bert's number 2.
It is Batman Begins. It's another one that's just very personal. A lot of the themes that take place, which aren't always that happy, resonate quite a bit more with me maybe than some. It's the way the film deals with so many things that are important to me about loss and surrogate parenting. And the visuals are so good. The CGI is pretty good. There's more shots of Chicago in this. I think the writing is really clever. The editing is really tight. It's got a super, again, non-linear storytelling method, which it took multiple viewings before I realized, because Nolan stacks several scenes that are maybe roughly 10 to 20 years ago. He'll stack them, one after the other. And sometimes it's like, wait, I thought he was just there. And you're like, oh, that's another flashback. Like, there's no clue that you're seeing a flashback a lot of the times. That's some of the fun, is sort of figuring out where all those things come to place in the true telling of the story. So that it's a a masterclass in editing. I feel like there's some terrific smaller roles here. Morgan Freeman is great. Rutger Hauer is really good as Mr. Earl. And yeah, Cillian Murphy's just terrifying. And he's not even really the main villain, which is interesting. Tom Wilkinson is really great as the mobster, this Englishman playing this very convincing and kind of scary mobster. And I think the universe that Nolan built is really good, and it feels big. And I like the underground, where they go underneath the city and that kind of thing. I like the way that's demonstrated. I do feel Nolan was kind of a pioneer, not just with Dark Knight, but with this one as well. I mean, he and some others have laid sort of the groundwork for a lot of the movies that we appreciate today, superhero movies. And I just think it's a really great origin story. I love that for a majority of the runtime, it doesn't even feel like you're watching a Batman movie.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And all the locations here. So the score, it is great. However, this is one of those when we rank I think did we rank top composers, right?
Yeah.
And I think I talked a little bit about this, but certain scores have some great themes, but that's it. The entire score isn't necessarily listenable. Like this is one of those. Like I absolutely love a few of the themes that are here, but I can't really listen to the score straight through because there's like horror elements popping out. Anyway, so but this is it's my I talked about this movie at length a while back on the pod. It's my number 5 film of all time. It's obviously
Oh
a
wow.
5-star film. Yeah.
How many
Excellent.
of Nolan's movies are in your top 100? If you have that
6, I
offhand,
think. 6. Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah.
pretty good.
At least.
Great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's half
Great.
his films. That's like an amazing,
Yeah.
amazing percentage.
Yeah.
Right.
Incredible. Great. Well, we're on to Josh, your number 2.
My number 2 is The Dark Knight Rises. And for me, these two, Batman Begins and Rises, are really close. I think a couple things that edge it out for me. The scene, I don't know how he did it because like the actual time span in real life between The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises is 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I didn't see The Dark Knight when it came out, so my time span was even less. I don't even know. Maybe have been. I think I may have seen The Dark Knight just because I had to before I seen The Dark Knight
Oh,
Rises.
okay. Yeah.
It wasn't that far apart. So even more to the point that he's able to, and I know it's like Cripple Batman in the beginning, but he's still able to, like in the movie's time frame. I think it's like 8 years or something that Batman
I think it
hasn't
is supposed to be
existed.
more years. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Batman hasn't been around, but it's so interesting to me that he's able to create this feeling of nostalgia as soon as Batman's back. That it's so weird that he's able to do that even in real time, as it's less time than in the movie it is for us, being only 4 years. And as soon as he comes back, and you got the rookie cop and the veteran cop in there, the rookie cop has no idea what's going on, obviously, and then the veteran cop like knows of Batman and what happened and it was like around, I guess. And like as soon as like the lights go out and the rookie cop's like, what's going on? As they're trying to chase Bane and everybody. And the veteran cop's like, oh boy, you're in for a show tonight. Like just like immediately right there. I can watch that one scene and just that one scene. And I'm like, all right, I gotta put on the movie now. Like it's just so good. That's probably my favorite
Hmm.
scene in the whole trilogy, is just that
Wow.
scene. And it's so cool that he was able to create that feeling of nostalgia for like he like invented a fictitious feeling of nostalgia, that at least resonated with me anyway. So yeah, that's one of the reason. Another reason I think is a score, and I guess maybe this might play into the themes versus the whole score again. But like I can listen to Why Do We Fall or Rise or any of those, and the like.
Yeah.
There's a few scores that I can listen to, or I should say themes or parts of scores that'll inspire me to like, okay, I gotta like I want to put the movie on now. And Pirates does that, Star Trek does that, the 2009. And
Ah.
this is probably the main one that does it. Like if I'm listening to Rise or something like that, or even Molossus, I'm like, okay, I want to watch the movie again. Did you guys see the video where Zimmer was talking about the creation of the theme? I know this is for Batman Begins, but
Probably a
I think
while
so.
like the
back.
two
I don't
notes.
know.
Okay, it's really
No.
interesting because it was for his masterclass video he did, and it was one of the
Oh,
preview videos they showed. They kind of I
okay.
think they took it down, but you can kind of see it if you search on YouTube hard enough. But essentially, he was comparing Danny Elfman's theme for Keaton's Batman, like da 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 da. And he was saying like, oh, it's so triumphant. But our character here in this story isn't there yet. He isn't triumphant yet. He's still in the dredges. He's still trying to figure everything out and like becoming Batman. So he was like he just like shortened it to those two notes.
I see
Uh,
what you mean, because then the two notes are kind of
Derivative.
Yeah, and then when I guess when he finally becomes Batman, then you finally feel the full on two notes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's
The
absolutely
bats.
fascinating. Just like
Yeah.
how he created this, just how that plays, like you said, like especially the end with Rise and of that score, the musical number, and just like the whole crescendo of the movie ending with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character discovering the Batcave and everything. It's just like, oh, I just get chills listening to those parts of it or watching those parts of it. But yeah, I really like Anne Hathaway as Catwoman. I know Cam, you weren't too hot on her take of it. But I think what really, for me anyway, like that the beginning when you first see her and she does like she plays the like, oh no, like there was a bad guy here, and it's like she's doing the freaking out thing or whatever. That was really cool because I guess that's like that was almost like a little meta. It was like, oh, normal person to now I'm gonna act, but except that was in a movie where she was acting as Catwoman and then was acting as a person freaking out. I don't know. To me, that just stood out. I thought that was really cool. Batman's back to being Batman after getting beat up in the second movie. So this is, I guess, that, and then just the power of the final confrontation between all of the cops and all of the prisoners. Like that, like they really had all those people out there fighting, and like that's I don't know how he did it, but there's like a certain, I guess, realism about it where you're just like, this is Batman and Bane, and they're fighting in the middle of all these other people fighting. And I don't know, I can't really explain it, but it's just like a really cool, like, whoa kind
It's a
of
cool moment.
feeling.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a really cool moment. I get the complaints about it, like with his broken back and then him in the beginning. But I don't know, to me, I just really love the film.
Great
Nice.
stuff. All right, on to our number one Nolan movies. My number one is Dunkirk. Dunkirk, I
Mm.
found to be just a riveting experience on this most recent rewatch. I remember seeing this in theaters and kind of being blown away by it then, but I think every time I watch it, I'm more affected by it.
Hmm.
It's one of those movies that reveals true history. I think it's the first film he ever did that was based on a true story,
I think
and
so.
it's also by far his shortest film since Following, at least. Clocks in an hour and 46 minutes, but it does everything Nolan does well, the best he's ever done it, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Um, Including the nonlinear structure, which I was very confused by on first watch, but I now fully understand, and I think it's just really ambitious and so again so unique. You know, he's a filmmaker that doesn't do things the way you expect a director to do things, and this is no exception.
Hmm.
So we're on land for 1 week. We get to see a whole week in those guys' lives. We're at sea in the boat for a day. We get to see a day in their life, and then an hour in the air. So with Tom Hardy
Hmm.
and his plane,
Like in
we only
total.
see an hour. Yeah, in total. So and but again, compressing that down to an hour and 46 minutes. So it is a very unique structure that you really have to pay attention. They do cross over at times. You know, you'll see Tom Hardy
Yeah, with
fly
the
over the
plane
boat,
and
and yeah, there's things like that that happen. So you definitely have to pay attention, but it really is rewarding when you do that. And I think it really pays off. This is another one all about perspective. You know, it very much to me felt like I was in the battle with these guys.
hmm.
It really does put you in their shoes in a way that very few other war films do. You know, I like that the characters don't really have names again or backstories. You get to project yourself onto them, I think, very easily. A lot of the characters, which I think works in its favor as well. It's just also beautifully shot. Hoyte van Hoytema is the cinematographer on this, who's shot his last couple movies, including Tenet. And this guy is really incredible. You know, Nolan loves IMAX, and this entire film was shot on IMAX, a 65
Oh
millimeter
wow.
film. And they're using these IMAX cameras are really big. And this guy puts it on his shoulder and like carries it around and runs down the beach with this thing. This guy is like incredibly strong individual to do this.
Yes.
Because these
It's
cameras cannot
crazy.
be light. Yeah, so just a lot of great camera work, a lot of handheld camera work. They specifically designed mounts to go on the airplanes for the IMAX cameras that had not been
Oh,
invented yet,
Wow.
because these are real planes up in the air that are flying around and doing all these incredible aerial
wow.
stunts. Really just incredible technically. I think IMAX has also, in general, improved Nolan. He's actually said this in interviews. It's improved his filmmaking style and technique because
Hmm.
I think a lot of his earlier films they're very intimate, kind of small, a lot of editing, a lot of quick cutting back and forth between things. Whereas this film, I mean, he has takes that last like a minute long, 2 minutes long. Some of these takes of just long shots of the beach or the boats or the planes or whatever's going on. So I think it's just improved him as a visual storyteller. IMAX has, and
Mm.
just giving him that big canvas to play with. So yeah, just a big fan of this movie. Again, very little dialogue. It's all visual storytelling. It's not a lot of, I mean, really not any exposition. You have to really pay attention to know what's going on. But another great score. I think Ludwig Göransson did this one as well. Very rhythmic. It's this one's again all about time. You got these guys on the beach, and you know, any minute the Germans could come over and wipe them out. So you just definitely feel the goals and the stakes and the sense of urgency all the
Hmm.
way through it.
Hmm.
And again, the fact that it's a true story makes it that much more amazing and kind of inspirational that these civilians came out and helped these guys in this incredible way, risking their lives. There's still a phrase in England today called the Dunkirk spirit, which is all about that kind of
Mm.
unifying and coming together to help one another idea. So yeah, this one I feel like it kind of gets honestly overlooked by most people. A lot of people haven't even seen it, unfortunately, but I think it's one that's definitely worth a rewatch. It makes a great double feature with Darkest Hour, which is about Winston Churchill. Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill, what's happening in England during the time of Dunkirk. So you kind
Oh,
of get the different perspective of it.
Huh.
But yeah, just to me, it's a perfect movie, beautifully shot, has a great sense of reality and emotion to it as well. And again, just kind of sums up everything I like about Nolan here. So that ended up being my number one. Bert, give us your number one.
okay. Well, my number one, Nolan, is also my number one film of all time. And another one we talked about on the podcast when we ranked our top 5 films of all time. So that's Interstellar. And this movie has everything for me, and it all works for me. Again, a lot of very personal things I get from this film that affect me immensely. And not everybody's going to have that impact brought in with it. Great story, direction by Nolan. The cast is wonderful. The acting is really great and believable. Let's put it that way. Um, the special effects, the practical effects are so good. The editing is really good. I like the twists, and I like all the different locations. Like some of the locations really do feel like you're on another planet, and they're not CG.
Hmm.
So I love the visuals here. And so here's the thing about Interstellar. This is the best way I can describe why it's my number one film of all time. Is imagine the best piece of music that you've ever heard, and it's the backdrop for a great film, and that just
Mm.
propels this movie so much higher too. I've logged so many hours, maybe hundreds, with this film score. It's just to me the best one ever, maybe my favorite piece of music ever. So
Oh, wow, nice.
you got a movie that's right, it's in my camp. It's exactly what I like from a movie, and I feel like it's done flawlessly. And then on top of that, this music. So that's why this one means so much to me.
Mm.
Great way to sum it up. All right, we're on to Josh. Your number one Christopher Nolan movie.
My number one Christopher Nolan movie is Inception. I think this might be the film of his I've seen the most. I don't know, because Batman's kind of split between three movies or two movies anyway. So it might be the one that I've seen the most of his. But the cerebralness of this is just so astounding. This is another one where a lot of his movies are such, like I said earlier, are such good discussion generators, and this is definitely one of those. Afterwards, we just had a five-way discussion with me and my friends. Were like, okay, hold on, we got to walk through this. What are all the different parts, and is this? Did he really get out of it? Did he not? Yeah, I know you mentioned that earlier, Cameron. I think the fact that we never see it waver and then we see Waver at the end. That was one. And then Nolan cited as saying that anything Michael Caine was in is real, and he's in the end. So
Hmm.
that's why I think it's really real at the end anyway. But yeah, it's such an emotional for being so complicated of a story and plot. It's you can tell it's like the characters are so powerful in it, and it's such an emotional story as well. There's like so many parts, especially with Leonardo DiCaprio's character and his wife Maul. Like there's so many emotionally dense and heavy parts of the film aspects to it that just I don't know. They hit home. Every single one of them is just like a shot to the heart. And I like what you said about Ellen Page's character, where we get to experience like that's such a genius way to hide the exposition. Because if her character was not in this movie, we'd be watching Tenet. We
We
wouldn't
need
know
her in
what's
Tenet.
going
That's what I
on.
was thinking.
Yeah. So, but her character is such a genius way to do all that because I mean, it's just interesting. If you're talking about
Mhm.
all this, like, oh, like you don't know where you got in, you're just here in the dream. You don't know how you got there. And it's true. In your dream, you don't know how you got there. You're just there. And so just different aspects like that where he's just like exploring it, walking through it and how it works and everything is so fascinating. I still don't understand some of the aspects of it, like the architect versus whose dream we're in and how what
Right.
things are attributed to what character as far as the way the dream works. But it's still such a fascinating thing. And like you said, the combining it with the heist element is really cool. And they're not like trying to steal something, they're trying to plant something, which I guess is kind of subterfuge still for the company as a whole. But anyway, really engaging story. And like you said, Cameron, everyone has a part to play. Everyone gets a moment to shine. Yeah, I think my only complaint is sometimes, occasionally, it'll feel a little long once the snow scene starts because it's just such a maybe it's because such a break from everything that happened and it's just like a you get a moment to pause and that kind of I guess gives you a little second to think about how long of a film it is. But other than that, like it's a pretty much perfect film and it's just like I can watch it every time and be like, even if maybe I didn't understand something before, but I'm still like, oh, like there's still those cool realization moments, and it's just so engaging. And of course, Zimmer's score with the time theme is just so emotionally resonant. Yeah, so all time favorite uh,
Nice.
Nolan film.
Great. Great stuff, guys. All right. Well, that is it for our Nolan ranking. Hopefully you enjoyed this as much as we did. Make sure you like the video, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. We've got all kinds of reviews on the channel right now, previous podcasts you can check out. Next week's podcast is all about the best movie remakes. Haunted Mansion is coming to theaters as a remake, so we decided to take a look at all of our favorite movie remakes of all time, and we're going to discuss those next week. Bert, thanks for joining us.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Kim.
And thank you, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks again, everybody, for listening and watching. Hello and welcome to The Real World. My name is Cameron. Today we're talking all about Christopher Nolan movies on episode 56 of The Real World Podcast.